Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us today for what I hope is going to be a really exciting and interesting panel. For most of you, this won't be the first time that you've seen a group of people get up on a stage like this and talk about where we think the future of workforce, workplace might look like. And so what I'm hoping we're going to get to do today is to dive into this issue in a little bit more depth, make it a little bit more real for financial services, and have you take away some interesting learnings. Because if you're like me, often when you sit and watch a discussion like this, too much it can either be a story of a workforce apocalypse, Terminators coming in, no jobs for anyone, or on the other hand, it's a utopian vision that feels perhaps a little bit too fuzzy to be true, that we're all only going to do the work that we really like and that everything's going to be better for everyone. And so I have here a fantastic panel to help us dig into two core questions. First, I want us to be able to more clearly understand what the future of work looks like. What do we mean when we say that? And how is it getting drawn out in financial institutions? And then to take things a little bit bigger and broader, to reimagine the role of humans and the role of work itself in society and what the potential for the transformation of the fourth industrial revolution is. And so joining me today, I have four experts on this topic. Steve Hatfield from Deloitte, Shefali Roy from TrueLayer, Kirsty Roth from HSBC, and Ebru, oh geez, I should have practiced your last name. I forgot about that part, from Citi. So thank you so much. A round of applause for our excellent panel, please. So let's dig right into it. Kirsty, I want to start with you. In your role at HSBC, you've crafted a projected 2030 vision for what the operations of HSBC looks like. Certainly an ambitious undertaking. Given that you've looked into the crystal ball, can you tell us who survives, whose job stays the same, who's utterly transformed, who are the winners and losers?
Thanks, Jesse. I'd love to think we actually really did have a crystal ball. That would be great. So we think about it relatively simply in three kind of key areas. So if you think about operations at HSBC today, I'm sure all of you have a bank, and most of what we do you would recognize. So whether that's make a payment, issue a credit card, pay your mortgage, etc. Those are all the kind of things that we do. And we think about a third of that work will disappear, and we're proactively trying to drive that, frankly, out of the system. And what do we mean by that? Anyone get irritated when paper turns up on their doorstep they didn't really want? I'm certainly one of those people. So really moving a lot of those things to digital, to be more nimble, more real time, et cetera. And frankly, taking waste out of both the economy and the broader system when you really think about corporate responsibility, plastic, paper, et cetera, that we all live with. So I guess if you're working on that, you're a loser, to your point, although I'll come on to explain that's not really what's happening in reality. Then there's the middle group where we call it kind of improve. We're really improving things that happen today. So payments will still be made, but people want them to be instant, real-time, cross-currency, et cetera. So there's a lot of investment in that kind of space. Account opening, again, people want, still going to need to be able to open accounts with their bank, but they want it to be pretty much instantaneous and not take many weeks or months, et cetera. So a whole bunch of areas where that needs to improve. And then the last third, to your point on the crystal ball, is I think a little unknown. We're starting to see bits of it. We've certainly got new jobs we didn't have even 3 years ago when I started, when I took on this role. So the RPA configurer, the chatbot enabler, there's quite a lot of jobs that we now advertise that didn't exist, and we're starting to see pieces of that. Exactly what that would all become over time, I think we have a bit to see. But we know there's that third group that's really using analytics and data and a lot of machine learning that we're going to evolve into.
So, Steve, maybe we'll take it over to you now. I mean, trying to take an organization as massive as HSBC and to steer it into the next decade, that's an enormous undertaking. Is there a playbook for the future of work? Is there a tried and true mechanism that you can implement to deliver on these changes?
I wouldn't say there is. It's new ground for everyone. But I think the approach that makes the most sense is you need to zoom out to look at that future and define what you think work will look like. What will be the work, the workforce, and the workplace dynamics of that future? And then zoom back in and start taking the first few steps to get there. So if your future workforce is going to be very data-driven or AI-enabled, and you come back to today and you realize that the number of AI specialists we have or the data-driven or data scientists that we have are too light for where we're headed, then you need to start upskilling and reskilling your workforce. Often what we find is the parts of organizations are letting certain people go and there's severance cost, and others are trying to hire people and there's hiring cost, and yet there's the ability to upskill and reskill that would be much less expensive and also produce the talent that you need based on the shortages that exist in the market and where you're going. It's getting to the point where your workforce strategy is almost as important as your business strategy, and because without it, your business strategy is spurious.
Fascinating. So, Ebru, where's Citi in this process? Where are you in the journey? And what are the types of skills and capabilities that you are most aggressive about hunting down in the future?
Sure. Thanks, Jesse. So I'll talk about three broad areas or themes that we are really focused on. Starting with the simpler one, simple as it may sound, is around technical skills. So financial services industry, for many years, we've been blessed with being able to find and afford people who's got good technical skills. So there's a lot of people who know what a derivative looks like, what a capital market transaction looks like, what a payments looks like, etc. You name it, all the good old financial services products. And then you can go out there and actually find individuals who's got lots of new technology capabilities, PhDs in data sciences, people who know how to think about the robotics, etc. The challenge is actually lack of individuals who know both sides of the coin, and trying to breed these special human beings who's got both the expertise and the imagination. And I'm going to talk about the behavioral side of things in a second, but even in terms of technical skills, sitting down with that data scientist who's got all the skills, knowledge, tools, and technology, let's say, but not necessarily knowing what it means to do a transaction monitoring process for an anti-money laundering check, right? So we've been very focused on how do we create groups of individuals who are able to collaborate and cooperate together, who can actually bring their different knowledge in teams, either virtually or in groups, and be able to think and create together. Sounds much easier than it is actually in reality. Now, the second aspect is behavioral, which is naturally very connected to the first part, but this is all about softer skills. I think we all think about emotional intelligence versus IQ. Now there is a third theme around adaptability coefficient and thinking about that, but this goes far beyond that. This is about curiosity. It is around behaviors of social responsibility, thinking about ethics, what good looks like, what actually client needs and experiences look like. So in this space, it's quite interesting because it's a lot more difficult to recruit, retain, and be able to develop talent because softer skills are simply more challenging. And I'll give you an example. We've come across a FinTech company who actually develops a piece of software by looking at individuals' activities on their mobile phones, how quickly they respond to WhatsApp messages, and how many photos they take during the day, and how many of those photos they send to their families. They try to tell you whether that person has a potential for being a criminal. Now, I get worried about that. While that might be a very interesting tool for human resources in the future, I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to interview individuals through those type of activities. So very interesting space. The third and the last one is actually managerial capabilities, because it's very important in the future. Employees will still need to be managed and supervised, probably with different behavioral and organizational mechanisms, but there is still going to be this command and management chain. And what does that need to look like? What are the capabilities of the managers? How do you develop managers who really understand what it means to do inclusive leadership? How do we deal with unconscious biases of people? So we are very focused on managing managerial capability and trying to develop our existing but also future leaders for management roles.
Excellent. Shefali, let's take it to you now. So you're the representative FinTech on the panel, and I know that when I talk to executives within large financial institutions, they often talk sort of longingly about the FinTech. They say, they're so agile, they're so fast moving, they're able to fail and change their principles and bring on new talent so quickly because everybody wants to work with them. So I guess I'll ask you. Where do you think the large incumbents can learn from you? Where do they have, no hope of catching up? And what's the thing that they don't know about that's a challenge for you?
So I should say that, I love banks. I used to work for a few of them. But the difficulty with banks, and I think it must be said, is the agility and is the ability to move fast. So to give you some context, you manage 50, 60,000 people. Citi has, 800 bazillion. Our company is 39. Our entire company is 39. We were talking to Citi recently about working together. Our company works in open banking. The entire Citi team for open banking is bigger than our company. So that was an exciting meeting. Agility is something that we work on. Empowerment is something we work on. EQ, a lot of Ebru's points, is something that we work on. Retaining talent is something that we work on. And I think when you are looking at learning and development, it is really tough. Don't get me wrong, for those of you who work in startups, actually, how many work in startups here? Okay, so it's not many, but I think everybody in this room who put their hand up would agree that startups are really hard. They're really, really tough. And it's sexy and all, but it's really hard. And you have to really want to do it. You can't hide. With 56,000 people, you can hide. But you can't hide in a startup. And so you have to empower people to use their skills, their intellect, their hard work, so that they can prove themselves and give them the ability to make decisions, give them the ability to fail, learn from those mistakes so that we iterate and then do better next time. I think with banks, it's not that they're not trying. They are trying, but some are trying harder than others. A lot of our customers, would you believe, are innovation arms of banks, which I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but nonetheless. And the reason they come to us and they talk to us is because their right hand is not talking to their left hand. And so it's really as fundamental as communication. So when you think about talent and when you think about learning and development, it's very much about understanding how you communicate with each other so that you retain the people that you want to retain. Unconscious bias affects us too. Don't get me wrong, quite exactly what Ebru was saying. It affects us too, and so we from day one are learning how to do better on that, and we have the time and the talent and the need to do that sooner rather than later, because when we get to, I don't think we'll ever get to 56,000, but when we get to hundreds, if you've not learnt it in the first 20, you've missed the boat. So for us, learning is a lot quicker, and we have to learn faster and clean up our mistakes a lot faster. So I think the message for banks is the way we do things, certainly at TrueLayer, is we very much decentralize decision making. We are not hierarchical. And I think when you get to large organizations, that's really tough to do, but we emphasize that every day, and we have a very, very transparent culture. So all the legal counsels in this room are going to absolutely be very upset with me when I say this, but we share everything. Everything is public, everything is documented, all those documents are public, our emails are public, within our company. So you can have an opinion and you can actually have access to data on any single topic at TrueLayer, even if it doesn't affect your team. What does that do? It gives them trust, it cuts out politics, and we then have an entire workforce that is working purely for the betterment of the company and the betterment of the product, not for self. And so that sort of environment and that sort of behavior of individuals is cultivated in our organization, and that makes us better and that makes us learn faster.
Interesting. So learning and transparency bound together as a single concept. Let's take a moment to sort of shift to more the human aspect of this, because ultimately when we talk about the workforce, it's composed of a number of individuals. Steve, Deloitte recently put out a report on the future of work. And in that, you talk about how it's important for employers to focus on creating meaningful careers for their employees, more so than it is to focus on cost savings and efficiencies. And I gotta be honest with you. I read this and I said, yeah, that sounds really nice on the brochure, but at the end of the day, you know, what matters is quarterly statements, right? Like your investors wanna know that you're squeezing every penny out, or every pence out. So, I mean, really, like at the end of the day, how do you reconcile these two challenges of, on one hand, needing to deliver an efficient organization, and on the other hand, wanting to create meaningful experiences for your employees?
So, Jesse, let me take issue with that, because maybe I'm the utopian. Maybe I think that it's possible for us to go after a preferred future where there's meaningful work for everyone. But if you aim at cost, then you're just automating bad process, right? If you aim at value, then you're at least moving up the chain. But if you aim for meaning in the workplace, meaning in what people do, you're bringing the human experience back to the job. And that's the act of creation, that's the act of exploration, that's the act of going back to the craft that you naturally wanted to learn in your passion. 70% of an engineer's time today is spent finding the data. In a world where the AI tools will take care of that, and that soul-crushing work goes away, what will those engineers do, right? And so I think that the opportunity for us is to bring the human experience back to the workplace, to bring it back to to what people do every day, and to connect that to purpose, which was the entire topic at Davos this year, right? And organizations that are able to do that will attract their talent and curate experiences for them and engage them in ways that organizations that can't won't, and they'll win.
And do you feel like the executive teams that you talk to and the boards that they report to are increasingly open to this kind of idea, the notion that this is the soundest path to long-term value?
I think they've begun to realize that business cases built on FTE reduction by putting in robotics don't work. The fragmentation in the job is too great. It's about redesigning every job. And the minute you step into the redesigning of every job, you have the opportunity to step into something that is far more geared to the value and meaning of that work and what that means for your employee and what that means for their end customer.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So this narrative of creating meaning in work, I feel it's something we hear a lot about when we look at recruitment strategies, particularly those oriented at younger employees. But at the same time, while everyone is looking for meaning in their work, radical transformation of the job is often challenging for those who have been doing relatively similar jobs for the last 20 years. And at the same time, we face an era right now where many people who thought they might be able to retire at 60 or 65 are going to probably need to work longer than that due to changes that we're seeing happening in pensions, shifting demographics, low savings. Ebru, when you think about the transformation of the workforce at Citi, how do you think about changing these roles and bringing the skills and the talent of the people who are in them today along with that and into the new role?
Sure. Look, I think first of all, I'll move this away from a age type of discussion to existing employees with 10 plus years of experience versus incoming batches of talent, analyst classes, associate classes, whatever classes they may be. I think it boils down to the basic principles of diversity and inclusion. Because actually, there is something for everyone, and there is something that everyone brings to the table. Going back to some of the comments that I was making in terms of actually experiences where you need to put together these, different skill sets or experiences, actually some of our existing employees bring the experience, the longevity, the knowledge, the stability. They are typically a lot more loyal than the incoming new generation talent who's very ambitious, but also who's trying to grow very, very quickly and doesn't necessarily have some of the loyalty element that actually existing employee base brings. which is important because that's the kind of stability that any large organization requires. The second thing that I would say is, and actually there's a very, very interesting article in the current issue of HBR, Harvard Business Review, on a similar kind of topic, where they have surveyed a whole bunch of people across 10 or 12 different markets, workforce and management. And there seems to be a very big disconnect between what management feels and worries about future workforce and what actually employees feel like about the future workforce. And the conclusion of the article is around the fact that there is a lot more adaptability and there is a lot more forward thinking and wish and will with the existing workflows working employees than what managers actually believe there is. And it's very important to close that gap because there are definitely opportunities in terms of development. They don't necessarily have to become the software engineers of the newest technologies, but they can bring the curiosity, ideas, and innovation and be actually excellent mentors for the incoming talent into the organization and actually get mentored themselves in the other direction. So I think it boils down to actually making these different generations and experience sets working together rather than working against each other or as if they're in competition with each other.
Excellent. So when we talk about making that sort of shift, obviously learning and development on a lifelong basis is critical to enabling it. Shefali, you talked a lot in your earlier remarks about learning and development. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what is it that makes that such a challenge to undertake, and
Sure.
maybe dig a little bit more into how you're thinking about it within your organization?
Sure. I mean, I think just also to just add to a point that Ebru's just made, and I'll be a bit contrarian. I think loyalty is a two-way street. So if you're expecting an employee to be loyal to you, you should be giving something to that employee back. Now, if you're a woman in this room, you're underpaid. You know that. We know that. And one would therefore ask, why should I be loyal to you if you're not paying me equitably? So you should go back to your managers and find that out. But then it gets to, Jesse, to your question of learning and development and how do you integrate that? We are hiring incredibly ambitious, smart people, very curious. We're also employing, and I think this is this generation, who are incredibly demanding. And so they're asking for things that when I started my career, I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, either because the infrastructure, the environment was not conducive to asking, or you just didn't ask because that was a thing to do, or because of the color of my skin, I didn't have the chance to ask. So I think we're working in a generation that is entirely different. When we look at hiring, I hire for nice, I hire for ethics. I hire so that I know that when I'm not in the room and two of our founders who are not in the room, that my colleagues and my team are going to do the right thing. So you can't learn that and you can't develop it, and it's an inherent, innate quality of a human being. What our employees and what our colleagues demand is an equal share and an equal right. And I think bigger organizations have more trouble perhaps putting that infrastructure in place. But for us, in order to compete with some of the coolest startups in the UK and certainly in the world for our business, it is not just about, oh, here's some money and go do a course, or here's some money and go get a certificate. Like, whoopity, good for you. That's really not about what we're trying to achieve. It's very much a holistic, ongoing, consistent approach to how we look at developing the individual. And I'll end with the point that when we look at performance reviews, we are looking at a framework. My personal view is that performance reviews are incredibly awful for an organization. Because I don't think they address the fundamental issue of how a human being develops and grows. It is not healthy. It is for mental stability and mental state for individuals, it is awful. And I don't think we do a good enough job about that. So when we look at things like performance review and compensation, and therefore how do you grow as an individual, for us as an organization, it's very much about thinking, let's look at each individual as an individual and tailor development and tailor performance and tailor their plans to that individual, not as something that is universal, because that just does not work. And each human being is different, each human being is special and unique. Let's treat them as such. I think we have that luxury. We're very lucky that we're only 39 people, so we can do that. Does it scale? I have no idea, but we're going to try. And I think it's hard to figure out, well, as a human being in learning and development and in giving back to an individual, because it has to be a two-way street. I, as a company, have to reward and recognize the brilliance of my colleagues because they give me their time and their talent. It is a reciprocal thing. Loyalty is not a one-way street. Therefore, how do I look at the mental stability of my colleagues and their growth and their individuality? And that, for us, is the holistic view of how we look at things. Excellent.
So we're getting tight on time here. Kirsty, I want to give the last full question to you. We've covered a lot of ground here today. I want to go back to your crystal ball for a moment here. When you think about the future of HSBC and more broadly about the future of financial services as an industry, what's the thing that you're most excited about?
So I think it's, I like the way Steve describes it as meaningful roles for people. I don't think we know exactly what they're going to be, but I think the early things we're already seeing as we see more machine learning have been great. Roles we have, to your $1 million question, of course, we're all eliminating roles all the time, but the people aren't disappearing. They're learning new skills, they're developing, they're getting involved in agile teams and digital teams and things they didn't even know how to, couldn't even comprehend maybe 5-10 years ago. And so they're evolving, right? They're not disappearing. And I think that is exciting. Our average employee has 2 degrees in about 3 languages, right? These are super smart people. And I think a lot of the time we were not using them previously to their full potential. And this is really giving us a chance to do that and to get the very best out of them doing really meaningful work.
Excellent. Well, I think what we've seen here today is both a really ambitious and an extremely optimistic vision of the future of financial services in terms of implications for the evolution of the workforce, the workplace, and work as a whole. I think one of the things that's really resonated for me across this panel that you've heard each one of the panelists talk about is this focus on the long term and a long-term creation, not just of value for the organization, but for meaning. Meaning as a team, meaning as an individual. And as well, I think one of the things that at least has really excited me is that we've heard almost each panelist talk about the word curiosity and the notion that financial services can become, even more than it is today, an area in which curiosity, kindness, and ambition can all work together to better serve that financial institution, but also the broader ecosystem that it exists within. So before I let you guys go, though, I want to ask one last question. And we've got folks here from the regulatory and policy community, folks from the incumbents, from the FinTechs. When they go home today and they think about the future of the workforce, what's one actionable recommendation that you can give them to consider as they carry the torch forward, if you will? Stephen, let's start with you.
So I would say own the narrative. Own the narrative on future of work. Don't let the social media, the press, the robot apocalypse be the story. Own the story that is about the preferred future, and own the story that is about the opportunity that we have to create it.
Shefali?
For me, if you're in a position to sort of set the narrative, as Steve says, then I think you should. But for me, it's very much don't settle for the status quo, demand better, demand more, because people will provide it if you demand in a quiet, authoritative voice.
So I think, Jesse, where you commented a minute ago, be curious, right? Keep learning, be comfortable with learning, being really comfortable that we all don't know everything. And I'm certainly faced with things every day where I sort of have to go, I'm sorry, what are we talking about here? So I think that, comfort factor that it is evolving and being comfortable to do that will put us all in a really great position for the future.
Ebru?
I think for me, it's something that I believe all of us should do a lot more of, which is to listen. I think we are typically all very judgmental. Here we are, all of us, we all had opinions and we shared all of our opinions, but actually listening a lot more than we do today. It's listening to the employees, listening to our clients, listening to each other. So I think for me, the biggest ask or takeaway would be to go and listen to learn.
So I think that leads me well into a thank you to all of you for coming and listening to us today. Thank you to Innovate Finance for bringing us together for this discussion. And thank you to my panelists for painting an optimistic and an exciting vision of the future of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.